I think that could be possible. I think if yeah, you just kind of wait up, but yeah, certainly play works well with people with trauma history, including adults. And so it that could be a real nice way for siblings who've had a trauma history to, kind of see what comes out together. If we do it together, then we're also building a projection for their relationship as a sibling unit. So that's if we did it together, we're kind of looking at how do you guys, kind of relate together. And if we're doing the processing on their own, you could do individual centuries with them present. And we've done that sometimes in family therapy where one person does it, but then the other person watches and then they kind of support and observe and things like that. So there's a lot of different combinations you can do when you get to play in families. It's just a whole different world of different things you can do. All right, I'm gonna jump on. Oh, so so we did all four in there. So those are the four in there. I'm gonna move on. There's more questions. We can kind of do them a little bit later. So this is what I already talked about. I had this in this slide. Important knows what overall primary goal for family therapy sessions. Hopefully remember the quiz question is our overall goal is to shift the problematic dynamics in the family, how they see each other, how they respond to each other, how they problem solve together. It's not about the problems, it's about how they deal with the problems. So any of these techniques can work well, but you're always looking at, number one, assessing the dynamics. And then as you get into it more, how do we intervene in the family dynamics? And we didn't have time for that today, but that is something I've worked into longer presentations with family play therapy, would be how we use play therapy both as an assessment piece and as an intervention piece. So there's a way to do that. I figured out how to do that. But if you guys have agencies where you get more in-depth like play therapy training like this, then contact me and we can talk more about that if that's a desire that you have. Okay, so let's talk about how do we actually do the family play therapy session. This is something that when I was doing was just missing. It just wasn't there. And a lot of stuff is stuff that people could probably figure out on their own, but I haven't seen anywhere else that had that really named and targeted out until I started, teaching about it. And there's some, I think, a publication out there about it and different things like that. So there are three parts of family play therapy session. And so here's what they are, and I'll describe what each of them are. So you have the content of the session, you have the process of the session, and then you have the discussion phase. Okay. So if you think about it, what is the content portion or a component of a family play therapy session? I took this from kind of the family therapy literature, talks about content versus process. We're just using this a little different way. But the content in this way of thinking about it is the play therapy part of it. So the play therapy part of the content, which is what do they produce? If we're doing the puppet show, what is the play that they produce? What is that? What are the metaphors and symbols in what they produce? If they're doing the sand tray, what are the symbols and metaphors in the sand tray production that they created? If they're doing an art therapy exercise, what is, the metaphors and symbols that came out of their um, their art activity that did. So just pay attention to that, and that's where the play therapy training comes in handy. Is then you can kind of decipher the variables a lot better, kind of see what's happening in the play, you have more experience with that. But when you're doing the family play therapy exercise, you're definitely watching what are they producing? What are they doing with that activity? That is a definitely very important informational piece that we can gather a lot of meaning from. Second piece then is the process. And then you can guess what is the process part? Well, the process is the family process. Okay. It is how they're doing it. It is how they're creating this activity or this puppet show or how they're doing the sand, how they communicate with each other about it, who's in charge, who's not in charge, and different things. And so this is the part where I said earlier, where you get to sit back and watch 100% process for that 5 or 10 or 20, 15 minutes that they're putting this together. I'm just there observing the family interacting, which is so valuable, so important. And so I'm taking little mental notes. I'm kind of, seeing what's happening. And I just let them go. Now, some people will say, if you have play therapy training, like, why are you making comments? Are you saying things about the play? Sometimes I do, but not as much because I want to kind of, at least in the early stages, I'm kind of let them kind of do it on their own. I'm just kind of watching. Mostly, I might make a few comments here and there, but I'm not like you're doing in child play therapy. I'm not like doing, the interactive kind of commenting kind of stuff. And so those two, number one or two, are happening while they're doing the play therapy exercise as a family. And then number three comes into play at the end. Once they're done with it, then we have a discussion phase where we get to talk about the family about what's going on. And I'll tell you about how I do that. So the discussion phase, I will typically, number one, start with the content and talk about the process later. So first we'll talk about, what they produce. So let's say they do a sand tray. I'm going to start talking with them about what they produced in the sand tray. And another ordering thing that I found very important is I also start with the youngest to the oldest. So I'll ask the kids, so what do you guys think about this that you created together? What is this that happened here? And they get to tell me about all the things from their perspective. And then I'll talk, let the teens go if there's teens, and then the adults. Why do I do it that way? Because I don't want the younger people to be influenced by the older people. And plus, you're still with attention span. Now, the kids will be really engaged with the play therapy part of it, but once you get to a discussion phase, you have to understand that the time clock starts ticking on the child's attention span. Once we're done with it, they're going to start checking out within a few minutes. So we need to give them kind of time to get their things in first. And then we talk about the young kids, and then we go to the olders about what they produced. And then we'll talk about the process. This is how they did as a family. And so again, I'll start with the youngers and I'll say, hey, what do you guys think about how doing that together as a family? Is there, we think went well? There's some things you guys, thought was a little bit hard. Well, mom kept on doing this or that, whatever the kids will say, right? Hopefully the kids are still engaged enough in that part. And then we'll start talking with the older people. And then there's discussions that come out of that. And then if I'll find out what the family wants to say about it first. And then at that stage, I'll kind of start sharing some of my insights after the family's already shared theirs. And by that stage, the kids will probably be checking out and they might be playing with the messing with family play therapy stuff. Take a picture of it if you want to keep it as it was, and then save it for record or whatever it is. Have the family take a picture of it. But at that point, people say, "Well, is that a problem? The kids are starting to check out." At that point, I say, "I'm all totally a-okay with it," because the kids have done so much already. They were part of the process to create it. Now they've been part of telling us what they think about it. Now we're having some adult discussion at that point, and they're messing around. As long as it's not disruptive, I'm okay with that. The kids have done their work. They've done great. Cool. You kids are awesome. And then we have some discussions, have the parents help process what came out of that. And that's where then you get into the third piece, which is where we want to go from here. Do we want to keep having family session? Do we want to do a part member or part family therapy session? Do you want to do dyadic where we do, just siblings, or we just do parent-child kind of thing, or we want to do some targeted individual therapy sessions. We might want to talk with a parent or a kid or somebody a little more in depth about that. So, oh, thank you, Kelly. Put up the link for the Family Crucible. Um, so that's where that is, and that's where you have the choices. And so you kind of say, how do I decide what choices we have? This is another model I've created that we don't have time to talk about today, but I have a kind of a model of kind of looking at different choices of types of family therapy sessions and some considerations with that. But basically the short stick of it is the when you have more of the family system in your session room, you have more ability to intervene with that family session. So I call it, more systemic power sort of thing. But you have less what I call clinical power, which is can you intervene in individual issues as well? No, because if we're having the whole family in there, we have to kind of spread it through everybody and things like that. So if you want to get more in depth, more targeted, then doing a part family therapy session where again we just have siblings or just have part of the family system, or we get into dyadic, where it's two-person kind of thing, or individual sessions, each of those then get more potent clinically because we're able to really dive in more deeply into their issues. And that can still be a very viable thing to do from a systems perspective if your goal is to focus heavily on part of that system. So that's where that systems framework still comes in handy. If I'm doing a visual session, but I'm still doing it from a systemic lens, then I'm still part of that big picture. I'm just focusing on, working on a particular piece of that. So that's how that comes into play and some choices you're going to have after that. Okay, so Jack is asking how many hours does a session last? Typically, I do it in the 50 to 60 minutes. So normally you can get that in, and so you tell them what you're doing. You can get launched off. You do a lot of other stuff with it. You might have trouble doing it, but I get launched in there, tell them what they're doing, and I'll give them 10, 15, 20 minutes to produce it, sometimes up to a half an hour. And then you want to leave probably a good 15 or 20 minutes for the discussion phase where we can kind of talk about what's happening and kind of decide what to do from there. So probably at least 10 or 15 minutes, maybe up to 20 that we're going to be in there. So yeah, you just kind of watch your time. You give them kind of a little timeline. So, okay, you guys got 5 more minutes, 1 more minute, finish it up, and then make sure you have enough room kind of that last quarter of the session or so um, for the discussion piece of it. All right. Let's talk about some stories in here. Okay. So one of the places I practice, I was active duty military in the Air Force. Earlier in my career, I was a clinical social worker in the Air Force, and it was a really great honor to serve and to also help these military families. And so one military family that I remember working with, they were both the husband and wife were military, so they were dual military together and they had a blended family, so they had kids from other family systems, and so they created this centre together as a family. And what happened was it really looked like a fort. I mean, it was just hunkered down with boundaries, and they had, I think, soldier kind of things. I mean, it just was very military-like, you know, looking. And I'm like, well, is this because they're a military family? They just really got it, ate up on the military theme of it. But as we talked with them about it, what came out of the play is they go, one of our biggest issues is we feel really watched and criticized by each of our former spouses. So the kids would go, to visit their other families, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, dozens of times. They get in there and they come back, and these, so what are they doing? What are they doing there? What's going on there? And they start doing the questioning thing and try to find out what's going on, and they try to find fault and what the parents are doing. So both parents really felt like they were under attack, so to speak, from the ex-spouses and when the kids go over there. And so, this militaristic kind of family centre wasn't just the fact they were in the military, it was what they felt. They felt like they were under attack. And they had to always watch themselves, watch their back to be able to, see what's happening. But it was really just a cool way to see that in visual form that they created that in the sand tray. So that's one that I thought was really cool. Another one, Stepdad in the Family Puppet Show. So this is part two of the one where I talked about the man who's the sheriff, the law enforcement officer, who didn't want to get involved in the play, and so we we got him involved in the play. But it was so fun. They did this family puppet show, and I cheat a little bit. They're not always puppets. Sometimes I'll get Beanie Babies or some other animals because I don't have all puppets. But they still been able to use them fine. And so the kids got in there and they gave mom, I think, like a frog, it was Kermit the Frog or some sort of frog type thing. So she was that, and each of the kids kind of picked their own identities. Guess what they gave the stepdad to be? He got this alien, this green alien. And that was the thing the kids gave him. And then they start talking about their story, their play, and the kids are talking about eating the alien. So you can just see all sorts of rich symbolism in that situation that these kids are like, okay, how do we eat the alien? This guy that's coming into our family system. And so, that certainly was a rich discussion when we talked about that. We just say, hey, kids probably feel a little angst here. They're a little bit worried about what's going to happen. when this man is going to be part of the family system, and they're right now seeing it as a little bit of a threat, and part of them wants to neutralize the threat. So kids spoke, right? And so we kind of just helped the mom kind of hear that in a constructive way and that sort of thing. But mom had a funny comment, it's so cute. She's like, but look, we both have green puppets. He had a green alien, she had a green frog. So she look, we both match. And so, mom's trying to find harmony in there. But it just was a cute thing. But it was really important for the kids to be able to express that and to share that. And that's how it came out in the puppet show. Blended family with the fish aquarium. So that's the one we have the blue piece of poster board, and then the kids all make their fish. So I had a family once where it was a single mom and she had three kids, but all of them were all from a different parent. So three kids, different father for each one. So they were only connected through mom, but all lived with mom. And so, they created this fish, and so I think it was the middle child who's it was the daughter was the oldest one. She was like 13, and then the one son was like maybe 10, and then man, that was like 7 or 8. I forget what, 6 to 8, somewhere in that range. And so the middle child got his stuff out first, and so he starts building into this aquarium and put it on the poster board, and he starts putting seaweed, and he started just making camp. He's just going in there. And then the younger brother, the youngest one, he got his in there next. And I think mom finally got hers in there. And this girl, this oldest girl, she just really was decorating her fish. I mean, she was going to town on it. She loved it. By the time she got done with that, the middle brother had already pretty much filled the space. Mom just barely found space, and there was no place for her to put her fish, which is super interesting. She was the only girl in the family system. Number two, she was ethnically a little different. So mom was African American. Both of the boys were, as far as I could tell, were pretty much full African American. The daughter was part Hispanic, part African American. So I don't know if that played on there, but she was different, a little bit from her brothers. And Jim had a different father, and the middle child father had the father had a lot of money, the other ones didn't, so he felt like I guess more importance. So you just saw a lot of really interesting dynamics that this girl felt left out. And then we talked to mom about that, and she was, "Oh, I didn't want that to happen. I guess we didn't really, save room for her like we should have." So then it shows some parenting things in there that mom didn't really navigate that well to make sure that there was place for her. So then you wonder, does this girl feel kind of, you know, bounced out sometimes in the family dynamics? And so that's really an issue that would need to be addressed with in family therapy, right? Because it's something that we need to really work on. Um, Fourth one with the Misfit Toys and the puppet show. This was back in the Air Force days as well. Is We did the family puppet show, and so I had a mom and her three kids, and um, and then she had the military member was actually quite a bit younger, so she was probably in her early to mid 30s, I think, at the time. And then she married, remarried to this military man. I mean, he was probably early to mid 20s. I mean, he was not that old. And their oldest daughter was like 13. So I think, he only had like 7 or 8 years, 7 to 9 years on the daughter. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic right there. But the show they created was about, basically Rudolph and the Misfit Toys kind of idea. And it was right around Christmas. And so I thought, maybe they just watched Rudolph and that's what they're thinking about. I always kind of wonder, does it really work or not? But then as I was talking with the mom about it, it actually had a symbol in there that was relevant to her. She's like, yeah, for a lot of years, especially before I got remarried, she goes, I felt like I was just this misfit mom and I just had these kids and I didn't know where I fit in and it just seemed like I didn't fit with my friends. And I just felt like I was on my own. And maybe she still felt that way. And so that came out in the play, that this theme of misfit toys. She goes, yeah, I felt that like that a lot. And it really gave us an interesting thing to talk about. We also know something else in the dynamics of the three kids. Um, the stepdad played with one of the kids more heavily, and then mom was playing with the daughter more heavily. And then we had this one son that nobody was engaging. He was completely left out of the equation. And so we talked about that later, not in front of the kids, but later on with the parents. And guess what happened with that? This one child that was left out was actually the product of a rape. He was not, from the other dad. And mom's like, I've tried to be really careful not to hold him against him. But that's interesting. It still comes out a little bit in the play that he just was not, he just was not picked up by anybody. And he felt left out. And we talked about a little bit when the son was there. Do you feel left out? Yeah, I feel left out a lot. So the son kind of confirmed that. So that became a really important family piece that we're okay. We need to work on that. We need to make sure this kid feels engaged, he feels loved, he feels accepted. We need to make sure that he's really a part of what is happening here. So that's a really important thing. So yeah, is it build a house technique developed by Carlos Sharp? Yes, that's where I got that from. So yeah, there's a publication in there. Um, yeah, that's a really great technique there. So last one, triangulated daughter and the build a house technique. So this is the one where if I can describe it since I don't have it, drawing up flavor in the schoolhouse, I'd draw it for you. But basically, it was a mom and a dad and their daughter, and they created this where they created like three rooms. They had this big room that mom kind of created that was kind of the living room, and she put some things in there. Then you had this room next to mom's that was this little bedroom. That was the daughter's room. And then you have this other room next to the daughter's room that was dad's room. And they called that the garage. Dad was in the garage. And this was in Texas. He was a good hardworking Texan farmer, big guy and big burly guy. But he was in the garage. And then the daughter's room and then the mom's room. And one of the things with the mom's room is she didn't really have room for herself. It was the family room. And as we were talking about, she's like, yeah, I don't have room for myself. Like my whole existence is the family, which every mom feels like, all the time, a lot of times. So she didn't really have any individual boundaries herself, didn't have a space for her own. And then dad has his thing, but then you look at it, dad and mom are kind of separated, and then we have this room in the middle for the daughter. Well, isn't that interesting? What do you make of that? And then I did um, did a sculpture with that one, and I saw again the daughter was kind of felt like she was and she placed herself in the middle between her two parents. So we can kind of see what's happening, that the daughter felt triangulated in between her parents' marriage. And if we look at it, there's a concept that Murray Bowen talked about called the emotional divorce. And he came up with this idea when he was watching schizophrenic families that sometimes you'd see these marriages that were kind of on the fritz, and somehow the schizophrenic psychotic child knows about this. And so their psychotic symptoms would kind of act up, and there was a mental health crisis, and then the parents come together, rally together to try to fix the problem with their child. And while the problem happens with their child, then they're working together and they're actually acting like a couple. Then when the symptoms go down, the couple kind of drifts off with each other again. Well, I remember that idea, and so I saw that with this family. This girl had some ADHD issues, but mom and her just had some really big conflicts over homework, lots of things. Dad was gone, a lot during the day. And then when he came home, mom's like, that's your child. You take care of her. She's not doing her homework. Make her go to bed. So then dad was a heavy and gets kind of grumbly with her and gets her kind of going. But there just was a lot of conflicts in there. And the other part was that dad had a substance use problem that he was in remission for. But he had really, for a lot of years, been in some pretty heavy substance use. And so he wasn't in that now. But the couple finally admitted after we saw that I said, is there some couples issues here? And he said, yeah, we do. We could drive an hour together and hardly say a word to each other. There's just not a lot of thing. And they realized that when their daughter was acting out and having problems, that's when they would talk together. The most time they talk about is how to deal with the daughter that was having problems. I'm like, well, it looks like, and the play confirmed it, that your daughter feels like she's responsible for your guys' marriage. And as long as she acts out, then you guys are working together. And there could be something very subconscious that if she doesn't have symptoms, you guys won't stay married. And they go, wow, wow. And so we did do some couples therapy with them. I said, you guys need to work her out of a job. you guys need to work on your marriage. You need to work on being happily married so she can see that, and then do some united parenting so she can see some boundaries with parenting. But she needs to learn that she is not needed to save your marriage. And it worked. They kind of worked on that and they did some things and things were improving that way. So, it's just some really cool stuff that you can see out of these types of things. So those are some fun stories that I've had over the years with that. So now we have full-on question time here. So Kelly, guide me. Where do you want me to start
Well, there
with
was a
this?
question just a few minutes ago about what type of questions do you ask, since they are supposed to do most of the processing.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So typical questions I'll typically start off with will be, what'd you guys think about this process? What'd you think about working together? Families don't know what the word process means, but they kind of get it. But how do you guys feel? What'd you think about working together on this? What was this like for you? I'll ask things like, hey, what do you think went well? How do you think things went well with you guys doing now? Start with a positive. And they'll say, what do you think are some areas that maybe you guys kind of struggled with? And what kind of caused those struggles? And let them kind of bring up some things. Then I'll ask some follow-up questions. Okay, what do you think kind of contributed that? Or what are some things you think would improve that? Um, if we were to do this again, what were some things you think you'd want to do differently next time, kind of thing. So just get them thinking about some things. And this is something that Carl Whitaker talked about in one of his publications, is that he likened the therapy room as a symbolic microcosm anyway, and that things we do in a therapy room become symbolically something that can be extrapolated out to their real life. So part of that idea is if we process that in the family therapy session, what we do differently with the play, then that can become an extension to some things that might um, be some things that they might shift into in their real life, symbolically, as we're talking about it here.
Oh, so awesome. Um, let's see. We had another one that just came in. Have you provided therapy to another therapist? And if so, how have you found their professional training impacts their family relationship? Yeah.
It is always hard, isn't it? It's hard for a doctor to become a patient, right? And that is tough. Yeah, I've had some of that here and there. I remember one of the things that was probably more intimidating things for me was when I had a couples therapy case that came in, and the man had a PhD in marriage family therapy like I did. So he had the equivalent education I did. He knew all this. He had director of a clinic in the area, so he was running his own clinic. And so, I felt a little intimidated that for a second. But then I remember, hey, we're all human, and I know how it works for me. You know, um, I know if I get too far off track, my wife will say, "I can't believe you're a family therapist." I know it's just in certain moments, but just we all have our moments, right, when we're not acting like our best self. And so yeah, that was the time. But he handled it well. We just kind of dealt with it and we went with it. And sometimes he can talk about some of the theories. If he wants to know what theories I use, I'll tell him because I don't mind sharing that. So I think with therapists, they might want to kind of know where you're heading with it because they want to figure you out. Sometimes they might be a little bit more blocked. I mean, sometimes we can be that way. So you just need to kind of work with them, make sure that they're there as a client and not as a therapist. Say, okay, in this setting, you're here as a client. You're here as just a human with human problems, and just see if they can kind of park the therapist side of them kind of off to the side and just be human. But I think you could have a little bit of blockage issues where I think sometimes some of us might be a little bit guarded and open ourselves up to therapeutic intervention because we do it ourselves. So you probably need to work with that a little bit, I think.
With that. I think we all kind of deal with that when we're working in this field. It's like, I should,
hmm
yeah.
Oh, there's a couple of questions. So let's see. Rachel had hers. What was the one, Rachel, that you had that said, let's come back to that? Oh, was it online therapy? I think was that the one about online therapy?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. So have you done online therapy? Yes, I have. And I've done that with couples therapy, done a little bit with a family, not a lot. So could you do this kind of work with online virtual therapy? I think the answer technically is yes, but it is harder because one thing, I mean, I've done couples therapy online, and that seems to work decently well. I've kind of figure out, especially if you can see both of them, you kind of, try to watch the nonverbals as best you can. I've done some play therapy online as well, but that gets harder because anytime you do the play therapy virtually, you have to rely on the parent, like with the child, being able to have the right kind of materials. There's some art stuff or some toys or things that you can do the play stuff because you don't have a playroom. You can't supply the materials for that. And there's some creative online things like a virtual sand tray and some other things that you can do. I haven't seen people talk about doing those for a family yet. So the hard thing you would have in doing that as a family would be where do you get the play therapy materials that you're going to operate from? And you'd have to rely on the family to supply that, and then you can run them through it. So you'd have to do a little bit of working with them ahead of time to see what they have, what they can put in there. And then you'd have to have a good camera view that can see the whole family, which could be a little bit harder where you can, if you both want to close up, see what's happening, but you also want to see all the members together. So that gets a little more challenging. I think it's something you could do, but there's a lot of challenges I think that you'd have to problem solve to be able to do that.
There's,
All right. Then Matt
there's
had a question too. I said, let's save that one. Matt, what was that one? I'm trying to
a-
remember what
I
that
was
was.
trying to find that, and while finding it, I did find another one I don't think has been addressed. Um, and they're asking in play therapy, how do you deal or confront a heavy-handed parent with them getting overly aggressive or feeling disrespected?
Right. Right. Well, yeah, that's a really great question. And one of the things when you do family therapy is you definitely have to have your assertive head on because, we kind of watch things emerge to a certain degree, but you have to be willing to direct traffic. And like I said, I didn't do a lot of maybe changing the dynamics when I see them kind of initially in the family play therapy exercises. I'll do it maybe a little bit later on. But anytime you see something that is damaging or critical where people are being emotionally hammered on, I would say something about that. And so what you do is the best way to do is you can always load this up on the rules of the family therapy session is that everyone's heard, everyone feels safe. We treat everyone with kindness and respect, that sort of thing. So you always kind of put that out there at the front end. And then if you have a parent that's hammering on a child, overbearing, that sort of thing, then you say, hey, mom, dad, um, remember, one of the rules is that we want to make sure everyone feels safe in here and feel heard and respected. So this is just feeling a little bit uncomfortable for me to have this kind of dynamic here. So you could do it that way. It's a little harder, confrontation, or you could say, "Hey, mom or dad, how about we redirect that a little bit?" And can you say that in a little different way? Can you use a little redirection technique? So there's a couple of ways you can kind of do it, but yeah, you definitely want to kind of rein in. I had one mom that came in with her teenage son, and I can't tell how many times she said, "Well, he gets in a fight with this one. He's a problem child because he fights with this sibling, and fights with that sibling, and then we have trouble with him this way." And she just kept on talking about how big a problem child he is, this teenager. And I just said, okay, hey, son, I didn't call him son, but hey, can you wait out in the waiting room? He's old enough to wait out there. I said, I just want to talk with mom for a little bit. So I talked with her for a few minutes. I just let her know. I said, did you kind of catch how you were talking with him? And just letting her say, this is what I heard. This is what I saw. You mentioned him as a problem child a number of times. And how do you think that's going to impact him for him to hear that often, that he's the problem child? Is there any wonder why you're having trouble with him? You're telling him he's a problem child. So I brought that to her attention. Oh yeah, I guess you're right. And so then we kind of worked on that. But certainly there's some things to work on that.
And Matt, I'm not finding your question. If you want to put it back in the chat, and
Or
I'll,
if you want to just unmute and tell us directly,
yeah,
that's cool
yeah,
too.
and we can
Yeah,
go on
sorry.
with
I'm
you
trying
in
to
the
remember what
last
it
one.
what it
Yeah,
was.
Um,
so just from a case management role,
Oh
if
yes.
you found ways to incorporate play into that type of role that you're playing.
Oh good. Yes, that's right. That reminds me now. That's a great question. I don't have personal experience doing it, but I imagine that would work out just as well because if, as a case manager, you want to find out what's happening with the kids, you could do some sort of play therapy activity and see, what they project in that, what they mention, and that would just say, hey, how are things going? Let's just do a little art thing, or, here's a sand tray and kind of show with me kind of what's on your mind, with kind of things are going. You kind of front load it that way. So I think you could use play therapy type stuff that way. One thing that I don't know if the state supports, I wish it did, is I don't deal with Medicaid with the moment, but I wish that and I don't know if they allow this to have step parent or not step parents, foster parents come in with the children that they have in there. I know when I did it in Missouri, they wouldn't pay for it. Like, well, that's not family therapy. Well, they're family in a moment, right? Right now they're a family. And so I wish, I certainly would support that kind of work where if you have foster parents working with the kids to do some family stuff with them. Because again, they're right now, that's the family system. And I think there's definitely some work that can be done there that would help them function better for the time that they're together. So kind of using again, some different ways of using it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Um, okay. How do you deal with family violence? This is Tyler's question. How do
Hmm.
you deal with family violence? Is it challenging when your ability to assess gets bigger than the family wants to have out? And then you lose families, unfortunately, who need help but don't want to be reported on.
Okay, so do they not want to share what's going on? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, family violence is definitely something in there that that you have to watch out for. And if you can really do a good case history, then you try to rule out for that. Sometimes you may not always be able to. And yeah, the question's right. Sometimes they might um, they might hide that, right? And it is certainly possible to do that. One of the cool things about play therapy family play therapy is that it's harder to hide it because it has a way of allowing our subconscious to kind of get involved. And it's something where a lot of times the projection can come out in a more honest way and the family dynamics come out in a more honest way, such that it would be you're probably more likely to pick up on things doing the family play therapy part of doing the play therapy with that. But um, it's not impossible. There are some people who are really guarded, and I've seen this in family play therapy or couples play therapy where they're really good at blocking it. So you can't ever say that that's not in there. Sometimes they won't disclose it. Sometimes they'll block it in the play. So sometimes you might not know what's going on. Certainly, if you do know what's going on, then we might pause on the family work and do some individual work or have each, the person doing it and not doing it in some individual therapy because you'd want to get people to a place where they're working on the family violence piece. So we're not just bringing up issues and then having someone, go home and punish people for what they say or express and things like that. So, that's certainly something you want to pause on if you understand that's going on and then do the family or couples work after you feel like there's been some work done on that.
I think that's something, no matter what type of therapy you're doing, things start to open up, you're hearing more information and you're realizing there's probably something more here than I realized. And
Yeah.
how do I
Yeah.
handle that for safety and,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kelly. I think they might block it, so you can't see it for sure, but it might be hard for them to block it completely,
Right.
where you might kind of catch a sniff of something. You're like, hmm. And that's why I say when after you do the session, you pick up on stuff, you can do different sessions. You might choose to do a parent session or an individual session with an adult, say, hey, I just think we need to talk about some things. And like I said, with that one about, this one kid's being left out. And then I said, let's talk to the parents separately. And that's where I found out this child was the product of a rape and that, created some issues there. So, We didn't want to talk about that in front of the kid. She didn't want to talk about it for the kid. So we had to get into a separate session to maybe talk about some of those issues. So you can always do that if you catch a sniff of something and then, kind of follow up on it and then see if you can dive into it a little bit more.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. If anybody has a burning question, you
All
know, if you
right,
want to unmute.
Kristen.
Oh, wait.
You're,
Oh, here's one. Go ahead. Are you seeing it? Or you want me to read
yeah.
it?
So have you ever had an individual session where the kids really don't disclose anything or make any corrections to or connections work with because they're so literal? I can't think of any experiences where I have that. Most of the time, kids will be pretty gung-ho about getting into it. I've had some individual play therapy sessions where I've had just not very often, but a kid who just doesn't know what to do, and they're just sitting there like, "Oh, I don't know what to do." So it has happened in individual sessions where they're just not there, or they're not used to playing, they don't know what to do. So, you know, if you did have that kind of session, if it could feel like a dud. But at the same time, I would then watch what does the family do with that. The kids aren't engaging. Does the parent engage? Do the parents engage? If they're not engaging, like, okay, interesting. We have this activity, no one's engaging. So who's in charge? Who's taking the lead? No one? Okay. Interesting. So what's happening for you guys right now? I've just been sitting here for 10 minutes, not doing anything. And then I'd talk about therapeutic resistance, talk about reluctance, talk about there's always everything's therapeutic, right? So we learn in the training school, everything is communication. So that becomes something then we're like, okay, interesting. At first I'd feel like, oh, that's a dud, it didn't work. Okay, well, this is interesting. I'd like, okay, lean into it. What's happening here? So yeah.
Anybody else? Last call. We've just got a couple minutes. A lot of comments in the chat, though. Thanks to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the thank yous
Yeah.
and it seems like it's you guys have appreciated my share. I'm glad it's been helpful to you and contact me, let me know if you want to get some more insights or training or whatever, or just, if you have some questions, we can do it. But I'm glad that this has been a good thing for you guys today. And
Yeah.
I've had it's been an honor for me to share this with you.
Oh, it's been great. And I know a lot of people are probably like me where it's past the training and I think, oh, I should have asked them this. And so being able
Hmm.
to reach out to you is so great. So we really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Officially, thank you.
You bet. You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm gonna have to bounce because I have another appointment to hop
Yeah,
into. But
yeah,
thank you all so much. It's a great to be with you. And yeah, keep in touch and let me know if I can help you guys out.
great. Thank you so much, Darryl Haslam. This has
You
been
bet.
amazing. Um, grab that link in the chat, you guys. If you're looking for that evaluation, you want your CEUs, it's in the chat. So you can just click on it and fill it out. If your system, sometimes people work in a place where it blocks it out and you can't do it. You have to do it, from another place. Just copy and paste it, do whatever you need to do, so that you can go in and fill that evaluation out and get your CEUs. We so appreciate you being here. Like I said, I know that this is a busy time of year and we really appreciate you being here. We had a great group today and we're excited for the new year. We've got some good things lined up. If you're not on our email list and you want to be, you can shoot me an email. It's kelly.s@utahcounty.gov. That's spelled Kelli is my name. S as in Sam or at utahcounty.gov. And I can get you on that email list so that you'll start getting those flyers for our monthly trainings. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And have a great holiday. Do some self-care. It's perfect time. Okay. See you next month.